Hi, everyone. Hi, Jared.
We're back.
Welcome to another episode of As the Walker Turns. And I think today we're going to talk about how we're going to pay for all this, right?
Is that what's next in the guidebook?
I think so.
I mean, you want to talk about putting a damper on things like right off the bat. I mean, like,
Well,
the financial conversations are never good.
No, they're very tricky, especially if you don't know what your loved one's financial situation is.
Even
It's
more awkward conversation.
super awkward. And then if you've got a lot of siblings or family members that maybe think that they're entitled to said money, even more awkward. So yeah, there's no good way about doing this. I can tell you how, we've gone about it. Some other family members, that I've worked with in the past have gone through it, but yeah, buckle up. This is probably going to be one of the hardest situations to deal with your family members when it comes to not only the moving, but how you pay for it and justifying the expense in their minds.
And so what you're telling me is you have the secret sauce that's 100% guaranteed to make sure that there are no family squabbles or anything.
No, you're right. Sure. If I did, I'll just retire now. I'm doing that vacation you talked about. Right? Nope, no, every situation's different, everyone. I don't promise perfection. No.
So before we get onto the non-fun subject, you have conveyed a couple of interesting / funny, entertaining stories about your career. Take me back to one.
Well, since we're talking about how to pay for these things, I would say once you've committed, just make sure you pay your bills. I want
that's a generally good life practice.
Just, having to evict your mom with dementia, because the kids aren't paying the bills, is just not a comfortable. You want to get really uncomfortable, have those conversations. But I'm not going to drop names, but I will say that I was operating a building in Beverly Hills many, many years ago, and there was a son's mother who lived with us, and the son paid all the bills, and he was a very famous attorney. I mean, you just say the first name and everyone who would know who it is, and he would get real behind on the bills, and so he wasn't returning.
Like when we're talking real behind, are we talking like 90 days, 120, and 6 months?
Probably 120 days is good for the money.
Okay.
So we certainly had our rights to evict, but I was going to try and avoid that as much as possible. So it got dropped on my lap to call this very famous attorney and do collection calls.
Awkward.
I think after that, I just was like paying 6 months in advance, just because he was a very busy person and just kind of, I don't know, forgot about
it. I have to deal with this.
Pretty much. But yeah, I won't ever forget placing that phone call. Just don't do that. I don't recommend it.
So, well, rewinding a little bit. So we're talking about the guidebook that you wrote while on vacation.
Yeah.
Because you didn't have anything better to do, apparently.
Right.
So we've talked through the different types of communities. We've talked through the governing boards related to those communities. Now we're on to chapter or section 4, I guess it would be, that is how to pay for that.
Yeah.
So
yeah. Look, there's no way to break this to everyone. It
costs money.
A lot of money. A lot. Regardless of where you are in the country, senior living is not an inexpensive endeavor. For a lot of reasons. The labor is extremely expensive. The insurance that we have to carry is expensive. The building costs are expensive. I mean, it's any business. It's hard to run, but when you're talking about high risk situations, with these kinds of care needs, we have to charge in order to, pay the bills at the end of the day. So there's a few things. I mean, the easiest, well, I shouldn't say easiest, but most communities in the senior living world, and when I say senior living, I mean like active adult, independent, assisted, and memory support, pay privately. Now there's some caveats to that where you can get some additional money, but I mean, I would say of the residents at our communities, 95% are privately paying. So that's money right out of their bank accounts. We do ACH. I heard of one community a couple of years ago was taking Bitcoin. We don't do that.
Okay.
Like way too complicated. You know, we've actually gone away from taking checks, you know, unless there's a check,
Right.
because I mean, it's a kind of a process to deposit a check
Yeah.
anymore. So, you know, don't be surprised if it's an ACH. Some communities take credit cards so that you can get the points. So, you know,
You gotta love those points, you know, just
I
for
mean, you're
the-
gonna rack them up pretty
for
quick.
those vacations when when
That I don't take, sure.
when you want to write a guidebook.
No, neurotic. Okay, and that's not what this is about, Jared, okay, but anyway.
I'm sorry, I just keep going back to that because
Thanks.
it's just burned in memory.
So anyway, so expect most of the people in a community are to be paying privately. There are some residents that are going to be paying through long-term care insurance. Now, I'm not a long-term care insurance expert in terms of the policies, but I do know that certain policies only cover certain things. So if you're getting ready to place a policy, or you heard, you know, mom's got a policy in a safe somewhere or whatever, you really need to look at it, because some policies only cover assisted living. Some policies only cover skilled nursing. Some policies only cover assisted living if there's an RNs on staff. Some policies only cover if there's certain criteria based on their healthcare needs. So it's not just a clean cut, yeah, I got long-term care insurance, we're gonna
I can do whatever.
yeah, it's carte blanche to do whatever I want. So, and also, if you're going to be looking at long-term care insurance, most of the policies require the communities to fill out quite a bit of paperwork every month or every quarter. I mean, it's a lot of paperwork to prove that we're providing the care that they're paying for, which makes sense.
Right.
So long-term care insurance, maybe 5% of our residents, maybe, you know, I guess if I said 95, what was that? Yeah, we're doing that fast math today. So long-term care insurance, there are benefits out there for veterans and surviving spouses of veterans. It's called the Aid and Attendance Program, and there are actually some new legislative that they're trying to actually increase that funding, because veterans' homes are generally full with waiting lists for years on end. So to be able to bring in the veterans and surviving spouses into a community without a massive wait list is a benefit to them. It generally doesn't pay for all of it, but a pretty good chunk. So if you put that down with maybe Social Security or a little bit of retirement, I mean, I've seen some family members be quite successful with that. There's obviously qualifiers. So there's companies out there that do nothing but help you get those benefits. It's a pretty long wait period. I've seen as fast as 90 days. I've seen as long as 6 months. It's the government. So, you know, it's trying to get money out of them is not going to be a quick, easy thing. But that's another option. We talked a little bit the other day about waiver programs or Medicaid funding. So those are going to be for income qualified people. And again, that could take a while. They're going to, you know, they're going to require you to spend down your assets and prove basically that you need government help. And not everybody takes those. I mean, it's we don't take those at our communities. Some do. But that's just something that, again, you need to be wary of. Some residents, you know, pay for communities, they sell their homes. You know, it's usually where most of their nest egg is sitting, in the equity in their homes. That's very common for them to do, where they're cashing out money market accounts or other stock investments. So it's coming in from a variety of ways, but I would say most of it is coming from selling of homes.
Any national averages relative to cost and what? I mean, just to give people a guesstimate as to what they might be looking at.
I'd have to go look at the current recent study. I think it's in the guidebook, and I should know this. It's not in my head, but do I need to look at it, Jen? Can I please look at my own writing? One moment, please. Okay, here we go. Okay, so so let's look at the difference between assisted living and skilled nursing. Skilled nursing, again, is your high level of care, and you're looking at just under $122,000 a year. I mean, that's a lot of money. That's a lot. Assisted living on average is about $52,000 a year, so less than half of that. Some are going to be more. A lot of that's going to depend on the type of apartment you choose. Are you going to have a roommate? No roommate? Are you going to be on a very high level of care, end of life, versus someone who's super ambulatory? So, I mean, you could range anywhere from, you know, like at this campus I'm at right now, you know, we have a low end apartment that's smaller and independent living, 4,000, and a very high end, huge apartment for $9,400, you know, so, you know, you're going to have to be very
Largely
clear.
depends on what amenities and so, and
Exactly. Exactly. So when you're going into search, not only do you want to look for availability, like we are with my mom, she found a unit that she really, really liked. And so we'll probably have to go on a wait list for that when it comes available. So you're going to be paying for your square footage. You're going to be paying probably for the location, or if it has a great view. We have some views in our communities that, overlook a lake. You're going to probably pay more for that than somebody that's looking at a back, retaining wall. So just things to kind of think about.
So, this is something that I've heard come up with other residents or prospective residents. I'm just curious on your take on this. A lot of folks have a tendency to get very fixated essentially on the floor plan. But this one resident that I talked to is basically like, in all reality, the floor plan doesn't she didn't want to say it didn't matter, but she was like, basically what really matters is where you're at in the community. Are you close to things that matter to you? Are you where you can see things that matter? And she was like, yeah, she just really she was very passionate about essentially the floor plan is something that everybody tends to fixate on, but it really doesn't matter as much to how you live life on a daily basis once you're in the community.
Yeah, and I would agree with that. So the difference between a typical apartment building, like if you had your first apartment, you spend 99% of your time in that apartment, and maybe a little bit of time if you have an amenity like a pool or a courtyard or something like that. It's the complete opposite at a senior living community. You're spending very little time in your apartment. You're spending most of your time out in the common areas, gathering and having activities and doing those things. So as much as the floor plan matters to fit the furniture in that's important to them, if they don't come furnished, and making sure they're comfortable, yes, the location to an elevator or a location close to the dining room, or if they're really into exercise, the exercise room, that's important. But also looking at those common areas, where is the heart of the building might be different in each community, and how close can my mom or dad get there, and is that important to them? If they're super introverted and love to read all day, then maybe they can have an apartment a little bit further away, as long as they're ambulatory and they have really good light. Some people, sunlight is just like a make or break deal with big windows. So just that's where your loved one, when you're walking through different apartments, just look at them. Like when I was looking at my mom, she's like, yeah, I really like the sunlight because I can paint in this corner. And then another one was a little darker, and you could just tell she just like wasn't loving it, even though it was the same floor plan. So that was just a nuance for her.
So this is probably more of a question on the IL side of things, but I know you mentioned that a lot of times the revenue to pay for something like this largely comes from a house sale. And I've heard, residents or prospective residents talk a lot about possibility of like, well, do I want to move in for 3 months for a trial period, still keep my house, stay, I can cover that on a monthly basis until then. What do you think of that type of concept?
I think
giving them essentially the trial period to figure out if it's for them, as opposed to before they sell their house and don't essentially have that safety net.
Look, if they have the furniture and they have the financial means to do it, try it. It's a big move, especially if you're moving onto a large campus where you intend to be there till end of life. That may be a viable option for those residents. I would say, we do, most of the industry for the assisted living and memory support side may offer something called respite stays, where maybe they're there for a week or 2 weeks to make sure the resident can acclimate to the other residents and everybody feels comfortable with it. But here's the great thing about senior living. There's no long-term leases when you're talking about strictly rental. It's a 30-day notice. So you're not locked into anything 5-year lease or a 3-year lease. So that makes things, I can speak for our organization and most of the industry. So that makes it a lot less, I shouldn't say the commitment, because there is a commitment, but you can look at things in shorter periods of time. Yeah.
So going back to essentially, how do you recommend that the families have that conversation about the financial side of things?
Well, alcohol. I'm kidding.
Start with
I'm
one.
just, yeah, start with their favorite meal, quiet setting. I think if you're at the point where, I guess you could go about it two ways. One, try and figure out the finances first to see if assisted living or if this is even an option.
Right.
If it's not, then your choices obviously are going to be kind of made for you. They're going to be limited. But if you think mom has assets, but you're not quite clear, I think, and the decision has been made, like we're going to be moving forward, then it's just a conversation like, okay, mom, let's really go through your finances, because my mom was very hyper fixated on this. She's pretty frugal, and she's like, I don't have the money to pay for this. And I said, well, how about let's actually go through all of what you have, and this is how long you have without us having to sell, a piece of land or sell your home or anything like that. So mom, we've got this much time. And she's like, oh, okay. And for us as siblings, we were like, okay, that just gives us breathing room, that we don't need to address this for a pretty long period of time. Super lucky. But not every family has that. They may be like, we have a year. And I would always tell families too, if you're looking specifically for assisted living or memory support, depending on where they are in their health journey, you really should be budgeting at not only the rent, but the maximum care fees. Think about the worst case scenario and then back in it from there. Because if you can't afford the community at the max level of care, then it's probably not a good move. You need to be able to have something that you can afford until end of life, because the last thing you want to do is move them, 60, 90 days before, they pass. It's like the worst thing for all the families. Yeah. I know that's rough. Awkward. I know. Awkward.
But it's also, those are the type of conversations and thoughts and plans that have to be made, because at the end of the day, it's also reality.
It is the reality. And then that dovetails into the conversations about, do they have a will, a living will, and a trust? And then that dovetails into the conversation about DNRs.
Right.
And if they don't have those things set up, the chaos for the surviving people behind that. I mean, I share personally, my dad he died very suddenly of a stroke. He was 61 years old, and no one saw that coming. So the amount of work that we had to do as a family just to make sure my mom legally was okay with all of their, assets was just an extra burden and insult into a grieving family. So I just try to head off the headaches. So like, that's what we're going through with my mom at this moment, is the wills, the trust, the DNR. She's made it verbally clear, but it has to be in writing. So even if, God forbid, something happened to my mom tomorrow and we don't have a DNR, even though she's verbally said to us, I'm a DNR, I'm sorry, but the first responders can't do it. They will do it unless you show them a piece of paper. And I say that because my husband's a paramedic. So like, you got to have your documentation in a row legally to protect everybody.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Good.
Well,
fun times.
I mean, we are definitely ending today's conversation on a little bit of a low point, but what else is in the guidebook that we still have to unpack?
Oh my gosh. Well, we haven't even figured out how to search for these places. And if you decide to actually,
You mean there's things beyond Google?
well, yeah, there's things beyond Google. Probably get into that. I mean, if you're in a crisis, I mean, aside from Yelping something, there are other resources on how to look. And then once you get to the looking, you decide to step foot in a building, what are you going to do? What should I be looking for? Probably the next things we talk about.
Awesome. Sounds great.
Thanks, Jared. Take care.
Well, we will see all of you again soon.
Bye.